There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I are old friends that have been talking about movies since the dawn of time. Remember the obelisk in 2001? We were there.
I touched it. I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for those of you that are coming back, you already know this because our minds are just intertwined with way too much trivia about horror and science fiction movies. And we like to share it with you because we've been doing it with ourselves long enough. We'd like to share the love. I am here with my good friend and cohort and conspirator in crime, David Horton. Hey, David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well and feeling good and ready to talk about our topic today and other stuff. But normally we start with what we've been doing genre related, or in my case, probably not genre related, pseudo genre, film related. I watched a documentary, got sucked into it. I can't remember what initially triggered it, but it was about John Boorman, who is a director I really like a lot. And
I think he may be on our list this year, actually.
And like the movies that he's done. And anyway, got sucked into a documentary that I have never seen before called Betraying the River. And it was about Deliverance. And until we were talking off camera, I had totally forgotten I watched it last week. But I did. Cool. I watched it for like 2 hours. And it's a really great documentary. It's got all of the stories about Deliverance, the film. Those of you who may not know, it's a film that came out in the what was that, late 70s?
It's like 71. No, it was early, 72
early
maybe.
70s. Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty, John Voight, basically about a survival story of some city slickers that happened to go to the South. And I think it's Georgia, actually.
It is. It was filmed in Tallulah Falls, very close to my home. Yeah.
And
92.
They end up running into some locals, and bad things happen, and they have to try to survive and everything. Anyway, it was very unique and talked about a lot of some of the stories that I'd heard before, like Burt Reynolds really did, I think, break his coccyx.
Yeah, he got hurt. Mm-hmm.
He got really hurt, but kept filming for like 2 more weeks still, even though he was injured and didn't feel well. The Ned Beatty scene, which is a very controversial scene in it, was really uncomfortable for everybody involved and was difficult for them to film and almost got cut and left on the editing room floor. And John Boorman was insistent that it had to be there because of the implication to the story.
Well, I think
that it had.
The book was a runaway bestseller, if I remember right, by John Dickey. And one of the reasons why was because there was a male rape in it. And I have a feeling Boorman didn't want to cut it because a lot of people would be expecting to see it, probably.
Yeah, if it was a touchstone for the novel, yeah, it makes sense that it would be. But other stuff too that I didn't know, like John Voight himself was fairly agoraphobic or acrophobic, and didn't want to swim and didn't want to be.
Is that something to do with, oh, okay, 'cause I don't know what that is. That's something
afraid of water.
Okay.
Yeah, fear of water. And so that was a complication they had to deal with. They had to get him over that like the first few days. Another very iconic scene from that movie is for lack of an insensitive word, the very inbred boy playing the banjo on the porch in the beginning. John Boorman cast a local boy for that role because he looked it. the issue was the boy couldn't play banjo.
Okay.
So they actually had another banjo player put his hand up a sleeve of his shirt, and he's actually playing the banjo while the actor boy is just sitting there.
How funny.
And so I didn't know that. So I had to go back then and watch like that section of the movie.
I mean, I just watched that movie a couple of years ago because I hadn't seen it in so long. And of course, I didn't notice that. But yeah.
But it was just really interesting. It's got interviews with Reynolds, early interviews with Reynolds, and then John Voight and Ned Bay, all these really cool stories of literally survival on the river, trying to film this movie the way they did, because Borman is very exterior friendly. He likes to shoot in the woods and in the forests and in the rivers and wherever. And also just the fights that he got into with the studio and with editing and with trying to get good footage for what he wanted. And like the ending, they did not want that ending at all. They did not want a bleak, creepy ending to it. And he thought it was perfect. Because at the very end, the hand is the thing that comes up out of the water. Oh, they're going to be haunted by this story for the rest of their lives.
Well, I mean, and if it was made today, it would be the same. It would just, they would also be cannibals. I mean,
right. And at the very end, it would just jump out of the water rather than just slowly rise
like
up.
Jason Voorhees. Yeah. That movie predated Jason's jump by what, 5 years?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. It's not
so
really
anyway,
a jump scare, but yeah.
That's what I did in my pseudo genre week. It wasn't science fiction for me, but it was a really good behind the scenes of movie making.
Yes, and I do believe I'm correct in that we have a John Borman film on our list this year.
Ooh, what could it be, folks? What could we tell?
What could it be? There's a big hint for you. You'll just have to wait.
Yeah.
What did I do in my genre week? My gosh. Well, I finally got to see a little ditty called Late Night with the Devil.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah?
Yeah, I finally caught this after all the hype and Stephen King saying, you got to see this. And I have to say, it lives up to the hype pretty well.
Well, several of our fans and everything else have mentioned it and said they watched it and loved it. So
yeah, it's a really unique experiment, a la the techniques of Ty West.
Okay.
Only instead of making a movie look like it was made in the 70s, it's making it look like a television show that was made in the 70s. So that's the only real difference. It's really funny. Ty West has been doing this for over a decade, and now other people are doing it. So he's like starting a trend. For those of y'all that don't know, we did an episode a couple seasons back. You can find it on YouTube called House of the Devil. And that was a Ty West movie that was shot in like 2010, I think. And it looks like it was shot in 1980.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Costuming, film stock, lighting, everything.
Right.
Totally. Well, and X also looks dated too.
It looks like it was made in the 70s. Yeah, exactly. This movie is directed by the Cairns brothers. They're a couple of Australians. So they don't really have anything else that I know of. The cast is great, although I only really knew who David Dastmalchian is, who plays the late night television host. It also starred Laura Gordon, who is really good in it, Ian Bliss, and Ingrid Torelli. So I don't know if some of these are probably Australian actors, and that may be why we don't know them.
Maybe.
I'm not sure. A synopsis is: a live television broadcast in 1977 goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms. It's more than that, though. It captures all of that satanic panic that you remember from the 70s. Yeah, there's lots of clips of things like Manson and Jim Jones and stuff like that, too. As well as the late night television antics that you don't see anymore because it's a lot more polished. Back then, it was like off the cuff.
Well, you felt almost like it was the same guys that were doing the public access shows, and they're just up late at night and they've got to do this and everything.
Even Letterman back then was very low key and just run of the mill.
Let's throw watermelons off the top of the building.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Sure.
This movie gets 97% on Rotten Tomatoes with 185 reviews, and it deserves it. Some people don't like the ending. I kind of like it, and I don't want to
Okay.
spoil it.
Yeah, don't, because I'll definitely want to
Yeah,
watch it now
yeah,
and see it. It's on my list, of course, but my list is really long.
mine too. Well, that's what I did for my genre week, and let's see, how are you going to segue out of that?
Well, you talked about
We talked about Deliverance
crazy
and
antics
the
and
devil.
no devil, but crazy antics and things, which this movie we're going to review today does have some craziness to it, or
Well,
some
and the
things that
devil's in
are,
hell, and it's really hot.
well, and a somewhat period piece too. So
Very
there
much
you
so.
go. That's not a bad one. We are going to talk today about a movie that came out in 1964 called Robinson Crusoe on Mars. And Crusoe has no A between the C and the R. And I listened to so many reviews and podcasts and stuff of this movie, and they would go Caruso. And it's not Caruso. But anyway, that's just me and how picky I am. It was written by Eb Melchior and John Higgins. It was directed by Byron Haskins, who we have talked about a couple of times on this. I have talked about him in relation to Outer Limits. He did 3 or 4 Outer Limits, but most notably Demon with a Glass Hand, which is one of the best episodes of Outer Limits, written by our dear respected Richard Matheson and directed by Byron Haskins. But he also did War of the Worlds, the 64 version, no, the
Good
3
one.
version. Yes, the good one, not the Tom Cruise one that we did
Right.
too. This had you. Let's go back to the basics. Had you seen this film before?
I had seen this film before, but not as far back as you probably saw it.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. I remember you and I think Wendell talking fondly about this movie when we were friends in the 80s, but I never
Hmm.
saw it. So when I was living in Sandersville in the 90s down in Georgia, I caught it on TCM and taped it,
Okay.
like Turner Classic Movies or one of those that was on at the time that showed old movies. And I taped it and I loved it. I was like, this is great. I mean, it's very hokey. And I mean, that whole preview thing that you talked about a while back about everything is scientifically accurate.
Oh, the trailer. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It is not at all.
If you have never seen this film, please go and watch it right now and come back, because we will spoil it as we talk through it.
I think there's something psychological in people's heads that want to say Robinson Crusoe because it's never been that. Even the Daniel Defoe novel is Crusoe.
Yes, correct.
So
But there
everyone
was
just wants to put an A in there. It's
but there
weird.
was a very famous opera star called Caruso, who
Mm.
was extremely popular, I think, in the 40s and 50s, and had albums and all of that. And I remember getting confused with that at one point. But
Mm.
anyway, yes, it is Crusoe, and it is based on the Daniel Defoe.
Hmm.
And if you haven't seen it, go watch it
You mean
now. I
novel?
mean, novel. Sorry, film.
He was very
There ha-
old. I don't think they had
all,
films.
not in 1719, which is when the novel came out, but there have been film adaptations, of course. But
Right.
we digress. Go watch it if you haven't seen it, because we'll spoil it and we'll talk about it. And to appreciate this movie, I think, though, you do have to, kind of like you talking about the Devil movie, it
Late
is
night.
definitely a period piece. It's definitely has to be appreciated for the period that it was done. We had not even sent probes to Mars yet when this movie was made. And so they are trying to do their determination of what the science at the time says was accurate. And even Byron Haskin has said, we tried to stay as scientifically accurate as possible. It's just like 3 years later, totally found out, nope, all that was wrong. There is no
Uh,
water on Mars. There is no oxygen on Mars.
it's
There's,
not hot. It's very
it's not
cold.
hot. It's very cold. So all of those things, there is no
It
volcanic
should be
activity.
Robinson Crusoe on Mercury.
Yeah. Or just a strange planetoid would work rather
Right.
than date it to Mars. But like I said, I watched a lot of reviews and read a lot of reviews and everything. And it is fondly liked by
It
people. They
is.
like this. I don't know if it's the necessarily the storytelling, but they like this vintageness to it. Does that sound right or work?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's got. I mean, it's got a lot going for it. I like the fake sets; they look like Star Trek. Paul Manty is a great little actor. I don't know where he came from, but he's another reason why I enjoy this movie. Adam West is in it, so you've got a little bit of pre-Batman because this
yeah.
movie came out maybe a year before the Batman series, I think.
Huh? And this is so basically a synopsis in very simple terms. An astronaut named, I think his name is Kip, is stranded on Mars and he has to risk his life to save a runaway slave from alien masters. And it's basically a survival story. Paul Manty, which I'm sure you'll talk about when we get into casting, it's basically a single-hander for him for a lot of the bulk of the movie. And he does a fantastic job with it. We have to watch Kit Draper, that's his name. We have to watch him meet the struggles that anyone would on us in survival of first finding oxygen and then finding water and then trying to keep his monkey alive. But but all those things you would have to do to survive. Scenes? Were there scenes that you really particularly liked?
Well, the scene that I can think that I remember the most, and this is going to be stupid, is him jumping into that water naked. I was like, that man's naked, and it's the 1960s. And I was like, didn't think I was going to see that.
Happiness on Mars. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, Paul's pretty easy on the eyes. That's another reason why I like this movie.
yeah, he was a very handsome man.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And like I said, we'll get into more info on him in casting. But other scenes, I told you off camera that I really like the aliens just showing up starkly and shooting at them.
Yes.
They look like the War of the Worlds aliens minus the necks, like you said. But
Hmm.
instead of slowly coming up and shooting, they like jolt onto the screen.
They
They have
dart.
erratic movement, which is
Yeah.
very, I don't know, it's that classic 60s sci-fi that's cheesy that I dig, like that stupid movie The Bubble. I've mentioned it a
Hmm.
million times where you've got aliens that have a city enclosed in a dome. I don't know. I like some of the far-fetched sci-fi movies better than movies like Buckaroo Banzai that try to be far-fetched. I would rather see one try to be serious, set with, a space monkey, whatever. It just, I don't know. To me, this is more charming than a movie that attempts to be this.
Well said. That's interesting. You said charming. I think that's a great descriptor of this. This is a charming sci-fi homage.
And it is
They
paying
tr
homage to the novel, obviously.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
they try to stay true to their, to, like you said, the trailer says this is science.
This
You guys
movie
must
is
watch the
scientifically accurate.
in every detail, and you're going,
Yeah.
no, it's not. No, it's not.
Not at all. And there's some plant on Mars that you can not only eat, but make clothing with and everything else.
Oh yeah, yeah, and there's literally pools of water that
That you can bathe in and
we have
drink.
not found yet in our excursions to the Red Planet, but we'll see. I guess my scenes, because I love science fiction so much, I do like the opening, like 6 minutes or so of the Adam West part and the vintage technology that they're using with all the buttons and the dials and the blinky lights. And we've obviously put a harness on a monkey and threaded him through the wall to spin him upside down so he looks weightless. I thought that was great. A little miniature monkey spacesuit. That was cute. We're we're eating all of our food out of like ketchup squirter containers. So I loved all of that classic
Let's have
50s
Paul
sci-fi.
come down the ladder upside down, but we need to film it before his face gets too red.
Yeah, yeah. He needs to get out now. Yeah. So I liked that scene a lot. I liked the suspense scene of first going to, well, I guess the best way to describe it is I liked Friday's reveal, of the suspense of him going to where he's seeing alien spacecraft. He's been deserted here for months, but now he suddenly sees spacecraft and he goes to investigate and puts the camera up over the ridge. He doesn't even see what he's seeing, but he's filming it. And they start shooting near him. And suddenly in the background behind him, you see 2 feet appear. And you're like going, what is that? And suddenly Friday appears and he rescues him. And I thought that was a good scene.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, again, plot-wise and acting-wise, I think Friday's first speech and when he starts realizing Friday can talk and teaching him, that was a good sequence. And there's a good feel to the end of the movie, although I do think this movie ends way too abruptly. It just like goes, we're done.
It's like, we found you, we're rescuing you, the end.
Yeah, the end. Goodbye. The filmmaking of that last scene where they're using real snow. They are putting these actors and Monkey in real snow.
Yeah.
And I was going, yeah, I'm sure that was a lot of fun to do. But yeah. So those are my scenes, really.
Yeah. Another reason why I use the word charming, I think, is that this movie reminds me of the way I would have played as a kid, where anything goes. Like we would have said, here, take an oxygen pill. And that's what they do in this so that they can breathe. Or Mars is really hot. Let's take our shirts off and run around outside, that kind of thing.
Yep. That's the thing that Wynn and I loved about it was that type of stuff. Also, it's a retractable cable microphone for his recorder, and
he's got all this equipment.
Yeah,
in his little
stuff
cave.
Like the oxygen tanks. We used to take like 2-liter Coke bottles and paint them and put them on our backs and say, that's our oxygen tanks. I loved all of the equipment that he had. You had mentioned the equipment, but I also like that the scenic design overall. He's in the cave and they have those weird stalactites that are like green and red and purple. I was going, yeah, I love it. And then he finds an underground.
There's a lot of soundstage on this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's caves, there's cliffs, there's exteriors with like painted backgrounds. There's all kinds of, I mean, none of this was shot obviously on location, but not even on Earth.
Well, they did shoot several weeks in Death Valley. That's where all the exteriors were. And one of the things that was cool about it, Byron Haskin said that for decades, Westerns had been shot up in Death Valley in the up above LA. But they had always done the valleys because that's where you can have the horses and the wagons and stuff. He intentionally picked all of the cliffs and the mountaintops and the ridges and everything else in Death Valley because he said, A, it looked very Martian, and B, no one had filmed there before. So it made it really interesting to feel foreign and
Where did you get your information on this? Because I didn't find a lot of information on IMDb about this.
Not on IMDb, but you can look on YouTube and Wiki and everything else. So they have a lot of interviews with Byron. As a matter of fact, he had a huge quote that I've seen several times in reviews where he said this was probably this is his proudest film. He likes this film more than War of the Worlds.
Yeah, I saw that. I did see that.
And that the process itself was like I actually think the phrase was something like a director's dream. He thought the cast was great to work with, not a lot of hassles or issues or complaints.
I mean, well, first of all, there is no cast. There's only 3 people in this movie. But
basically, well, there's a monkey,
and monkeys are usually not easy to work with.
There's Fluffy the monkey or whatever.
Mona.
But no, it was actually played by a monkey named Fluffy or something.
Well, no, the character is the woolly. No, excuse me. The woolly monkey played Mona. Mona is the character. Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. The woolly monkey. I don't know what that means, but whatever.
That's the woolly monkey.
But I didn't know that much about Byron Haskin other than the fact that he directed War of the Worlds, which I love.
Well, you have to look it up on YouTube. I think you can find it on YouTube, but it's a late, I want to say late 80s, early 90s interview because Victor London and
Paul Manty.
Paul Manty remained friends
Oh yeah,
after this movie forever.
until they died.
Yeah, and it's them obviously very elderly, and they're in one of their homes, I assume,
How
and they're
funny.
being interviewed, and it is hilarious because Paul Manky is like, that monkey was a fucking pain in the ass. Let me just tell you.
That first season of Friends, they had a monkey named
Yeah,
Marcel on there, and it was
Marcel.
like hell. They hated that fucking monkey, so they got that thing written off by second season.
Monkeys are hard. They're hard to deal with. So yeah.
Well, and they like
Um,
to pee and shit in your shoe or whatever. It's just crazy. But
I mean, I would disagree with Byron Haskin in that I think War of the Worlds is a better movie than
I
this.
do
It's a better
too.
science fiction film.
Yeah, me
But
too.
this is a charming 50s sci-fi film. You know.
Mhm. It is.
That was not originally going to be that. Ib Melchior wrote the screenplay and wrote the script, but then was pulled off of it because of other projects. He just couldn't commit to seeing it through filming and everything. And so they brought in the other writer. What was his name? I can't remember it real quick. John Higgins. And he did the
John
bulk.
Higgins and Ib Melchior. Is that what you said his name is?
Melchior. Yeah. But Ib was upset after he finally saw it because of all the changes they made. I mean, the first being that in the original script, it wasn't a monkey. It was like an armadillo with like weird an armadillo-like alien. And there were a lot more aliens in it. He encounters alien species on Mars, similar to like when we covered Enemy Mine, and there's those little crawly creatures, and there's
Right. They look like trilobites. Yeah.
Yeah. So the original script had a lot more of that in it, of him being more, not just a survival thing, it's him being able to have adventures. I mean, survive literally aliens. And a lot of that was cut due to budget and timing and everything else. So he didn't really approve of all the changes to his creatures being made. He's credited with also saying that he created Lost in Space and never got credit for it. Ib Melchior says that he originated Lost in Space with a comic book that he published 3 years before Lost in Space ever happened, and it was called Space Family Robinson. And when I looked into it, I thought, he might be right.
Well, and Irwin Allen stole ideas left and right.
Yeah, and they're called the Robinsons in the series.
Didn't Fantastic Journey come out before like Land of the Giants or one of those that Irwin Allen did? I'm sure he ripped that off.
Oh
Or
yeah.
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. But Ib Melchior has other credits. He's got Time Travelers, Angry Red Planet, Planet of the Vampires. I thought you might want to watch that one.
No, if that's the one I'm thinking, it's the one that Mario Bava did. So maybe he happened to help with the script. But that's an Italian movie.
Yeah, he was the writer for those.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we need to cover that movie. I'm serious. It is the inspiration for Dan O'Bannon's Alien. It is.
Okay, we've got to do it. Maybe we'll do it as a Patreon.
Yeah, and you'll love the costumes. The costumes are gorgeous in it, and the lighting is gorgeous in it. But it's just a foreign, weird sci-fi movie.
Planet of the Vampires. Okay.
I mean, it's better than Buckaroo Banzai. I will keep going to that, by the way.
I guess you will.
What else was I going to say? Oh, I was looking at Byron Haskin. I just don't really know any other things that he really did. I'm not that familiar with him, except for this and War of the Worlds.
He did Westerns. He did a lot of Westerns. He did some, I don't think he ever did television. I think he was always
he did
director.
World of the Giants, but he only did one episode. He did like single episodes of series. He didn't do a whole series, but
of course
he did an Outer Limits episode. Actually, he did 6 Outer Limits episodes.
Yeah, he did a lot of Outer Limits.
But none of the movies have I ever heard of.
Yeah, he did, like I said, he did Demon with a Glass Hand. He directed that.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I mean, that's like one of the best known episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Outer Limits. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think he's a capable director. I don't mind the direction in this film.
Not at all.
I just think that War of the Worlds is a better told story. overall than
Yeah.
this one. Let's see. I've got some other trivia stuff.
Well, it's funny that you
production
mentioned
stuff.
that Ib says he was not credited for writing or developing Lost in Space, because a lot of this reminds me of Lost in Space. The fact that they have a monkey in a spacesuit reminds me of Lost in Space.
Oh, yeah.
Or some of the weird things that happen on the planet also
What-
remind me of Lost in
What
Space.
was the one? Bloop or Bleep? What was it? What, did he have a name like Bloop or something stupid? I hate
And it
Lost in
was
Space,
it was an animal that was made up to look like a creature, like a dog, maybe. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I thought it was. Wasn't it a monkey with
Was it a
weird
monkey?
ears?
I can't remember. I repressed that show. It's been so long.
I'm not a fan, but
I told you
I
my
think-
mother almost named me Zach, and I would have been Zachary Smith, and I would have to live with that my whole life. And I hate Dr. Zachary Smith. That was my
That would have
mother's
been
second
great.
choice of a name for me.
that would have been great. I can't. I'm going to start calling you Zach just for fun. No,
I'll start calling you by your middle name.
please no. Some trivia stuff. Did you know that the voice of the astronaut rescuing them at the end is Byron Haskin? That's his
No,
voice.
I did not.
Yep.
That's a good
What's
segue.
that? We
actually.
hear a voice from Mars.
Yeah. I don't have a lot on cast, and there isn't a very large cast, but you mentioned Paul Manty, and Paul Manty, he was a very prolific actor. He basically was on television in everything as like a guest star. He was on like Cagney and Lacey and all these other shows, but he did do movies. He was in Apollo 13, which I know you like. He was in The Manitou, which I like. That's a Tony Curtis horror movie. He retired in 2003, and very much like Tom Tryon, became an author. But he didn't. He only wrote 2 books, and neither of them were bestsellers like Tom Tryon. One of the books he wrote was called The Perfect Ravioli, which I'm assuming was a cookbook. I don't know. And then he did a semi-autobiographical book called Bruno of Hollywood. And he looks like a Bruno. That would be a good nickname for him. As a matter of fact, he reminds me of Robert Conrad, which is
very.
I mean, I could see him in Wild Wild West just as much as I could see Robert Conrad, or
Easily.
vice versa.
Yeah. He's a good actor, and he's really strong in this. And I think everything I've seen him in, I've always said, competent, great, good work. And like you said, he's not hard on the eyes. He's a handsome guy. He's obviously intelligent and able to play multi roles and levels. Interesting that he didn't do a little bit more, but obviously had a good career too, though.
Well, as a young whippersnapper of the late 60s and 70s or early 70s, Robert Conrad was on my radar because he was a hot dude. And had I seen this movie, this guy would have been on my radar too, for sure. Victor London played Friday. As you mentioned, he and Paul Manty remained friends until they died. And did you know they both died in 2013?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, they died in the same year.
Wow.
I
know they were good friends.
Yeah.
And shared a lot.
Well,
I know some trivia about him, though. I know some trivia about Victor London. He was the very first Klingon ever seen on Star Trek.
Oh, really?
Yep. The episode with the Organians.
I think we talked about this on our TDC episode on
He's the
Patreon.
first one you see. He doesn't really have the biggest part because Commander Kur with the little Fu Manchu mustache, he's the big villain in
Is
that
it Balance
one.
of Terror?
No, Aaron to Mercy.
Aaron to Mercy, okay.
You know, Gene Kuhn created the Klingons, yada, yada. Watch our Patreon, you'll know all these things. But Victor London was the first Klingon ever shown. He's the first one you see. He's his lieutenant who stands behind him.
And I think we mentioned that when we recorded that episode. It's just
I thought that was really cool and really neat. Yeah.
Funny. Very funny. I think I would have insinuated that perhaps they were gay, except Paul Manty was married like 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, there is a huge homoerotic subtext in this movie too, between him and
there is
Friday.
in the novel as well. I mean, you got these 2 guys who are there for, I mean, in the novel, it's like 28 freaking years.
It's a long time. And if you're on Mars with no one else but your friend that barely speaks English, you're probably going to find another language to speak, if you know what I mean.
Oh my God. Well, you reminded me in that interview that I watched with the two of them, obviously older before they died. And he says, yeah, we've always been friends, except for that time when you were dating my ex-wife. And London goes, that was only for a brief period of time, man. He goes, yeah, but you did. I told you she was a bitch, man. It's a great interview with the two of them.
I'll
You'd
have
love
to
it.
check that out. That sounds funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they're both going around shirtless and half dressed on Mars. So who
Well, and
knows what was
Victor
going on?
London actually had a challenge to do this and not make it silly or stupid or cliche. I mean, he spends a good deal of the beginning of his character not speaking at all.
No. And clicking
Um,
those bracelets together
yeah,
because they're like handcuffs that they're like shock collars that you would see on a
yep,
dog, except they're on your wrist. They've used that same method, another Star Trek thing. I mean, there's a lot of Star
yep.
Trek keys in this, and they did
Oh,
that
yeah.
with collars in Star Trek.
Triskelion. Yep.
Right. Adam West, of course, plays Colonel Dan McCready. McCready?
Yep. I thought the same thing as soon as I saw it.
A little homage, maybe, from
Where
John
were you,
Carpenter.
Childs?
We, of course, know him as Batman from television. I don't know that he ever did anything else that he was well known for. I mean, he really got typecast after playing Batman on TV.
And I've always thought some of that is his fault. I think he wanted to parlay that into movies, into a merchandising line, into whatever. I've always thought that Adam West was comfortable doing that, and that's what he wanted,
Well, I
as
mean, I
opposed to
think,
like,
didn't he always do like public appearances and stuff
oh
around
yeah,
LA
as
in costume
Batman.
and stuff?
What's the movie that I love? The science fiction making fun of Star Trek,
Galaxy Quest?
Yeah, very Galaxy Questy. He's doing supermarket openings and stuff as
Yeah.
Batman.
I remember seeing like Adam West in local car commercials dressed as
Oh, yeah.
Batman or something.
As
Yeah.
Batman. And that was, I don't know if that was part of his contract with them, that he could keep the image of him in those gray tights and everything. And that's
Mhm.
his gag. But I know he propagated that himself. So I don't think it was the negative typecasting that you hear about other people about they can't break loose. It was, this is my niche. I'm going to milk it till the last, nickel. And that's what he did.
Now,
And
I
he
can't
could have
imagine
done,
it was a very big nickel either.
yeah, and watching the beginning of this, he has such a great voice. He would have been so good doing other characters, doing something else.
Mm-hmm. And
He's
you know
got
what? Maybe he did do voice acting. I never really looked into that, but that would have been a good thing for him.
As Batman. Yes.
Not necessarily
but,
Batman, but anything. Yeah.
he could
And
have.
then-
I mean, because I think he was really had a good voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I mentioned the woolly monkey played Mona. I don't know of anything else Mona or Woolly Monkey did. And then this movie has no awards and
No.
is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die, which pretty much makes sense. But I have noticed that we're doing a lot of 60s and particularly a lot of 70s movies this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm noticing that a lot of them don't have awards. Not that I care, because they're movies I still like.
Remember, 60s and 70s was a time when those two genres that we love were basically derided. Those were drive-in movies. Those were
Mhm.
kids' television.
Especially
Scooby-Doo.
1964 when this came out. Yeah.
Yeah. And the late 70s was Star Wars, when suddenly science fiction got credit again, because 2001 didn't really do it, because everybody said, well, that was an anomaly because nobody can ever do that. That's a Stanley Kubrick thing, yada, yada. But they didn't get, even if they were popularized, they weren't recognized for their artistry. Remember, at that point, there was no makeup category. There really wasn't a special effects category. There was, but it generally went to optical effects, not makeup or production or costuming or anything else. So anyway,
Yeah. And
I
then
agree
in
with
the
you.
and then in the late 70s and 80s, slashers became
Yep.
popular with big studios like Columbia and Fox. And they started doing Halloweens
Right.
and Friday the 13th.
What
and all of
was
a
it? It
sudden,
wasn't
horror got
until
respect.
90 that a horror movie won the Academy Award. That was not until Silence, right?
Right. Right.
And I also have in my notes that this movie was actually marketed really badly and flopped totally at the box office
Mm-hmm. It did.
when it came out. Which is
It's a
interesting
cult
that you said
classic.
you first saw it on TCM, which
Mhm.
I love the fact that Turner Classic Movies showed Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
Oh my God, David, did you watch this on Internet Archive like I told you?
Yeah. Mhm.
It was a Criterion
Yes.
release. I mean,
Yeah.
this movie is well respected now.
Yes, for the time period it was made and what it
Right.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it may
Uh,
have been hokey and failed when it came out, but it's a cult classic and warranted restoration with Criterion and is on the Internet Archive. So, I mean, that's pretty prestigious, I think.
and I think it's the only science fiction film I can remember that actually has 8-track tapes. His recorders are literally an 8-track tape that he puts into the recorder.
That's just part of the charm that really cracks me up is that he's on Mars surviving in a cave with his little hot tub sauna, but he's also got all this equipment, including a tape recorder that
Yes.
he's using.
Which you have to have because he has to journal. It's Robinson Crusoe. It's any survivor movie. They have to journal
Well,
somehow.
he could have
we
been
can.
writing it, it didn't have to be recorded.
True.
But he did have his own loom where he was weaving whatever he was to make clothing.
To make his funky pointed hat thing
Yeah.
and his poncho. Yes.
Right.
Um,
Despite the fact that he goes around half naked most of the movie. That's funny.
yeah.
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 All right. So that's
thought
what
it
I had
was-
for cast and awards. Not much. Like I said, I could not find a lot on this movie.
Well,
I may have some trivia.
trivia. Yeah. I was going to go there.
Byron Haskin told interviewer Stuart Kaminsky that he, like you said, he thought this was a better film than War of the Worlds, which he also helped George Powell to direct. But he disliked the title and he blamed, well, first of all, it was a distributor's idea. The title was Robinson Crusoe on Mars, but he feels that the silly title led to the failure of this movie.
Maybe. I could see that.
Because it
Just
basically,
because-
instead of having a decent title, it's one of those titles I hate that tells you Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It's like a pitch title. That's a pitch,
Yeah.
not a title.
Excellent. Very well said. Yes. As opposed to something like Angry Red Planet or something like that. Castaway.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Stranded.
Stranded.
Gravity.
Ooh. Marooned.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have a silly title, and Haskin thinks that may have been why it failed. Because I think they all had high hopes for this movie.
Yeah, I think everybody did. I mean, even down to like I said, I read a couple of different things that the relationships on set were great. People loved it. The filming process was not, stressful or cramped or whatever, even with the low budget. Even down to London and Manteith actually came up with the dialect they were using, which was based on Mayan language.
Did you hear that?
I heard that. But was actually based on Mayan language because at that time, the ancient astronauts theory was available and people thought that the Mayans could have had contact with aliens from Mars because of all the carvings of spaceships and flight and all that stuff in Mayan hieroglyphics. And so they said, well, then why is the language Mayan? So it's we'll make the Martian language Mayan or the alien language Mayan. So they came up with it themselves. And Byron Haskin says, yeah, keep it. That works. Keep that.
Well, and London's whole look looks like almost like a stereotypical Native American from a Western in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
His haircut, his skin color, everything. It just, I mean, I'm not sure what they were going for there.
Yeah. Well, and my watch notes are usual David negativity all the way through it because of the stuff that just doesn't make sense. I mean, he keeps lifting his visor and closing it. I was going, then why do you even wear it? Why you can't pressurize it if you keep freaking opening it?
And it's like, you've got one tank of oxygen, but if you take a sip of it every 15 minutes, you'll be okay.
Yeah, so you're not going to breathe for 14 of those?
I know, and that one tank's going to last you X days? I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I was
Here,
all
take
the
an oxygen
science.
pill.
Yeah, all the science in this is just crazy. And he keeps wearing the helmet at the beginning, and all of the studio lights you can see in the reflection of the helmet. I was going, oh my God. Okay, well, just it's like the green slime. You just have to accept it for what
But
it
that's
is.
another one of my favorites that we've covered from this
Yeah,
era. I love that
right.
movie.
Right. His weapon of choice is a revolver, which wouldn't work at all without oxygen. Obviously, these writers don't understand compressed air.
Well, and like even though I love when the aliens turn up and start shooting sporadically, it's like, why do they turn up, and how do they know exactly where they are?
Right. Well, the bracelets later on.
Yeah, but not early on when they're shooting at Paul.
Yeah, that's my whole thing.
Yeah,
You're mining. Obviously, I get the impression from the videotape they were mining for something, and they were using Friday's race to be the
the
slaves in the
slaves.
mine.
Yeah,
And they're wearing the big, huge bubble helmets from Rocket Ship XM or whatever. But why are these ships shooting literally at everything all the time, blowing up mountains and ridges and stuff? I was going, is that how you mine? I don't understand what you're
they're
shooting.
showing
And
it. They're showing the people who the boss
I
is.
guess,
Yeah.
just other things stuff. So where is it? All spacecrafts have in the 50s and 60s have to carry chalk because he's using that on the board to mark the days.
Oh my
He's
God,
using
yeah. All of the stuff he has with him, I'm like, really? This was in your spaceship that you went
Yeah,
down to the surface with a tape recorder, a chalkboard, a loom.
and you drug this up here, with your only 14 minutes of oxygen each
Right.
time. There's that weird sequence also too when he has the hallucination when he sees Adam West's character in the cave.
That is weird.
That was
Is
that
Friday
was a
there by
weird scene.
then? Doesn't
No,
Friday
this
nurse
is
him through a sickness too at one point?
that's later. This
Okay.
was before Friday when he's like at the height of loneliness, isolation, everything.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah, yeah.
starts seeing visions or whatever. I did like you said, I do think there's some great things that are unique to this movie that I like, quasi unique. I do like the spaceship design, even though it is stolen directly from War of the Worlds, and that's because it has the same designer.
You mean the alien spaceships?
The alien
Yeah.
spaceship, not the US or the Earth spaceship is animation, except for the two capsules that fall. Everything else was
It's like
animated.
Space 1999. It just goes
Yeah,
right by the
we're
camera
done. Yeah.
so fast you can't even see it really.
And for the next half hour, we hear as it goes over every whatever 2 hours that it does.
Yeah,
But Albert Whitlock, who was the big Disney guy and also did The
the
Thing,
thing. Yeah.
all his matte paintings were great. I thought they
I
were
didn't
really
realize he
good.
did them, but I knew that they had good matte painting, so it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, even one that I really like, which has Kit there, and in the background you see the two moons moving and coming up, Phobos and Deimos, and I thought that was really a great shot. I like the way they did that. I like the way that the sky itself is red, which is great in all the matte shots and all the long, all the close-up shots when you see sky behind him. I liked. God, good thing their biologies work with this food that I just happened to find and eat.
I think it's funny there's only the one thing, but he's like making different things with it. And at one point, it looks like he's making chili or something, like some
Oh
kind of
yeah,
purple chili with it. I'm like, ugh, that looks awful.
and I've got in my typical David fashion. So, oxygen is a necessity. It's in short supply, and you have to keep sucking on this tank for 15 minutes, but you make a bagpipe? Why would you make an instrument that requires oxygen? Anyway,
It sounds like that was something he threw out one day on. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if I played a bagpipe?
yeah. How is there light in this cavern? There's always light in every cave they're in. So yeah, even when they are attacked, he and Friday, and they have to crawl into the hole and go into the canals underneath the canals.
Yeah.
There's light everywhere. I was going, where is it coming from? Why? How can you see in here?
Haven't you seen The Descent?
Yes. Yeah.
It's dark
Uh,
and there are monsters down there.
let's see. So Fridays, all running out of gumballs. I've got that in my list.
Oh, the oxygen pills. So do
Yeah.
you think the aliens gave him the oxygen pills?
Yeah. I think the assumption I think that's one of the things that Kit says at one point. Not only did they leave the slaves there, they left them there without pills, without oxygen pills. Which bodes the question to me, how did the monkey frickin' breathe? Did they give him a suck on the container every 15
Maybe.
minutes?
Fuck
But
that
so there's a
monkey.
lot of, yeah, throw the science out the door, the accurate science from the trailer, and just enjoy this for the story that it is of these two guys.
Well, it is a little influential, though, if we want to lead that into
Yeah,
keys.
sure.
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing I'm going to say is Daniel Defoe's book, Robinson Crusoe, which is
Yeah.
about a man that is stranded for a very long time and eventually finds he is not alone, which is
And
exactly what this movie is.
And I haven't read that book in decades, but I went back and looked at the synopsis, researching this, and I'd forgotten he gets cast away he gets shipwrecked like 5 freaking times in that
I
book.
don't know that I've ever read it, so I can't.
Yeah, he starts out being shipwrecked literally 3 times, and then the fourth time is when the bulk of the story takes place, and that's where he meets Friday and the cannibals arrive
How in
and
the hell do
everything
you get
else.
shipwrecked so many times?
He kept volunteering for ships, and they kept.
They keep getting bad ships, I guess. Maybe you should investigate
And
the
the novel
manufacturer.
itself is a variety of storytelling. Some of it's apostolatory. Is that the term for like
Epistolatory,
epistolatory? So
where
that's
it's
like,
like in a letter form, like
yeah.
journal
And
entries. Yeah.
some of it is journal entries. Some of it is first person. Some of it is third person. So it's very unique in the way Defoe wrote it. But yeah, it definitely is the inspiration for this whole story all the way through. Really,
You've already mentioned, but what?
I've got one we just covered, Enemy Mine. This
Yeah,
is very Enemy Mine.
it is
Enemy
so
Mine was
much enemy
obviously
mine.
influenced by this. Yeah.
And
Even
even
down
down to the
to,
fact that they end up being miners,
yep.
which was a
Yeah.
big surprise in enemy mine. It was like
Big
a
surprise.
throwaway
Yep.
almost.
I've got one that I think is one of your movies that you like a lot, Swiss Family Robinson.
Yeah, I have that
So I
for
think
sure.
that's obviously Disney went, oh, that worked. Let's do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. When did Swiss Family Robinson come out? Do you remember?
Wasn't it in the 60s too? Well, the late
It
60s?
was, but I don't know if it was before or after this.
Because I remember seeing
Actually, it was before. It was 1960.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was actually taken from some of it then.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't make coconut bombs.
Or, well, they do have their loom and they can make that. I thought it was interesting that they didn't have a fight in this. They didn't have a fight with the aliens.
Well, it would have cost money to create the suits for the aliens, I guess.
Well, they already had them. They were wearing those stupid bubble ass helmets that in the video. It's the only time you see them is
but
in
I
the
want them
video.
to be like Gorn. They need to be reptilian.
Of course they do. Always, yes.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be humanoid, but with an animal head or something.
There are 2 more models from this movie.
Okay. Yeah, I know one of them. One of them's the Martian.
Yeah.
Where a man is stranded on Mars. I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The Matt Damon
and
movie.
again, where you have a solo actor who's there for the bulk of the movie.
Yeah.
Having to handle it himself. And the other one I've got is it's not genre, but Castaway. Castaway's the same way with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, that's more of a modern Robinson Crusoe for sure.
Very much so. Except again, they don't have a battle at the end of that. They have him overcoming the tide in order to be rescued, and then his acclamation that lasts like 20 minutes is, "What's it like if you come back? The world is a little different than when you left it." And I also had it kind of is, but kind of isn't, but Mysterious Island.
Because they are shipwrecked.
They're shipwrecked and they have to make do with what's around them and to survive.
Mhm.
which is like this. I
It
mean,
is
he
very much like
develops.
this. Any movie or book where somebody is stranded, whether it be shipwreck or a space shipwreck, would tie in. I mean, it would. What?
Based on the picture behind you, you just made me think Tarzan. Tarzan's the same way.
Well, he
He's
does kind of look like Tarzan.
yeah, that's what
I
I meant.
said, I said he looked more like an Indian from a cowboy and Indian movie from the '60s. But
Yeah.
you're right, he does look like Tarzan, a lot like Tarzan. What we would picture Tarzan to look like. He doesn't look like Ron Ely or Johnny Weissmuller, who look like Olympic
Oh,
athletes
yeah,
that
right.
played Tarzan.
Yeah. The white Tarzans. Yes.
Right.
More like a Greystoke is what we should be.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. He's the what's that French actor's name? I can't even think of it.
Oh yeah. And then
Lambert, Christopher Lambert. Yeah.
yeah. Well, obviously another key is you mentioned already is the spaceships themselves. They were designed and built by Albert Nozaki. At first I thought he actually took the War of the Worlds, ripped the neck off and used those models. But no, these were brand new developed, but Byron Haskins told Nozaki, make them like the bottom of the War of the Worlds ships. That's what I want. Except I want a dome thing underneath them
That shoots
shoot
lasers out.
Yeah.
They should have used
Now,
that same sound.
I think they did. I think it is the same sound. And it's also the same sound that is used in Star Trek. So yeah.
Well, some of those sets were definitely used in Star Trek.
Yes.
I mentioned that, and it was true. They were actually. Something else that was borrowed are those spacesuits that you mentioned that the aliens are wearing. They were borrowed from Destination Moon, 1950.
I think I said Rocket Ship XM, but yeah, it's Destination Moon.
Oh, you did say that, but I thought you made that up. Is that really a movie?
Yeah, Rocket Ship XM. Yeah, that's George
XM?
Powell.
I've never heard of that.
Or X1.
It sounds like
I
a
think it's X1.
serious radio channel, like Sirius XM.
I think it's X1, not XM. Sorry, but yeah, they've got the big shoulder bubbles and elbow joint bubbles, and then they're big round with a round opening for the face. It looks like they're terrible. They're not good.
Like Robot Monster.
Yeah, Robot Monster. Yeah.
There are too many movies in our head. I think that's all I had, because you mentioned Star Trek. That was the only other one I was going to mention, is that a lot of these like cave sets were reused in Star Trek. There's a lot of caves in Star Trek too.
Oh yeah. And that's all I've got. That's all the keys I have. I think it's influential. It's charming. It's great. It's just like you said, you have to accept it for the time frame in which it was made. And the fact that they thought at the time this movie is entirely scientific.
Scientifically accurate.
Scientifically accurate. And it was not. So,
well, before we part, going forward, I don't know if there's ever been talk, but what if they ever remade this movie? What do you think would be a good way to consider that option? I mean, most of the time we don't want to see a remake, but to remake this, like I wouldn't want them to go, remember how I told you I like this because it's unintentionally silly. If you make it intentionally silly, I don't think it would work. Like if you put Will Ferrell in Land of the Lost, it's not going to work.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to see a Will Ferrell version of this.
Well, like we said, I think Martian is a good remake, so to speak, of this in a way.
It's more scientifically accurate, though.
I think if you were going to blatantly remake this, maybe you could cyberpunk it and do it that way, so it has a uniqueness to it that is a reality that's totally true to that time. Almost like 20,000 Leagues said that you could have submarines made with great big rivets and stuff, and that was the reality of that film and that novel. Almost like a Jules Verne approach to this might work, but then it might be like First Men in the Moon, and you didn't like that. But thinking about it, that would be a key with this too.
That movie was too comedic. This movie is not.
Correct, but you could do the same aesthetic that came from kind of like what you were talking about with the Last Night in Hell or whatever? Last Night with
Late
the
Night
Devil.
with the Devil.
Late Night with the Devil. What if you did a remake of this with a 50s aesthetic that you answered some of the scientific inaccuracies?
I totally agree. I think you should remake it almost the exact same movie, but use special effects looking much more up to date and realistic looking, but play it straight. Don't play it for comedy.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah.
And you're right.
think that
They
would be
don't
awesome.
do that. The character work in this seems real between the two of them.
Mhm.
And between him and what he's having to deal with Mona and what he's having to deal with himself. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
And get two really good actors that would play it straight. Like use John Hamm and Javier Bardem.
Ooh.
What's that minute?
Yeah.
Somebody
and-
really
and-
good. Yeah. I mean, Javier Bardem may be a little bit of a cliche because he is ethnic, but it doesn't have to be an ethnic person.
No, but that would
playing
work and
Friday.
actually get rid of the word camp. We are not going to do this campy.
No.
We're going to do this realistic.
And
That's great.
but believe that there is such thing as an oxygen pill.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I would pay to see that in a heartbeat. Netflix, get on it.
No, don't tell Apple TV Plus. They'll turn it into a series.
No.
But-
It doesn't need to be a series, but it needs to be 2 hours taken completely seriously, but with a better budget and look.
And maybe add a fight or something at the end. Add something at the end so the ending isn't just so abrupt.
Or show the aliens without the spacesuit. Yeah. I could see
Like you
that.
said, add some Gorns.
Add some
So there you
Gorns.
Just add Gorns. That's
Oh
going to
my
be our new
God.
catchphrase.
That's funny. Well, I guess that's going to wind us down with our selection today, which was Robinson Crusoe on Mars from 1964, before I was born.
Wow. Not before I was, though.
We would like to thank you for joining us. Hope that you'll join us again in the future when we'll probably be doing a horror movie. Actually, I think next week is a double feature, our first of the season. And until then, you can catch us in other variations as far as video. We have some short shows that we do on YouTube, as well as we mentioned earlier, our side podcast, or actually, I guess it'd be a side video show on Patreon, where we cover topics like the original Star Trek, episode by episode, as well as the X-Files. And until next week, David, I guess I will be seeing you.
See you then.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.